I think I should start out by saying
Думаю, я почну з того, щоб сказати, чому я тут. Я була запрошена на програму спікерів з усього світу, яка організована спільно посольствами Швейцарії і Латвії. Пані посол тут з нами, і вона організувала цю подію. Я зустрічалася з професорами, з студентами, з українськими представниками громадськості. Ми в Латвії відчуваємо те, що відбувається тут.
For the whole security and peace in Europe. It is not just a problem for Crimea or for the Donbass or Luchansk. It is not just a crisis in Ukraine. I think it's a crisis for the world order, such as we've been trying to build it up, certainly in Europe and also in North America, ever since the end of the Second World War. It is a very unfortunate and very shocking return to the times when territorial expansion, what Hitler called his Lebensraum, the room for his own nation to live, should be expanded at other countries' expense. A serious aspect of this is that Ukraine, after recovering its independence, declared itself a nuclear-free zone, gave up the nuclear weapons it possessed, and in 1994 the Budapest Memorandum gave guarantees that in exchange for this giving up of arms, the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of Ukraine would be guaranteed by the three major co-signatories, which were the Russian Federation, the United States of America, and Great Britain. The fact that one of these signatories has actually grossly breached that agreement and that the other two have not been able to have sufficient political pressure on their partner to fulfill their guarantees is of course very alarming for the world at large. For some years now there has been pressure on Iran to ensure that Iran does not develop nuclear weapons. They claim they do not, and the West feels that they are moving in that direction, and this is destabilizing for the region. But I think that with arguments, when we start arguing now with Iran how they should stop their nuclear program, and that somebody is going to guarantee their safety and their territorial integrity, they will look to Ukraine and find it as a very bad precedent in terms of any guarantees having any kind of value other than arming. In other words, we are entering a world where the need for spending more on defense, on restarting the arms race, is somehow arising again, and this is most unfortunate. And this is why the world at large now is extremely concerned about what happens in Ukraine, both militarily, but also how the new government, the new president, the new parliament, how they are going to be dealing with the crisis facing the country. The international community has committed itself to support financially and otherwise, and people like me come to Ukraine to simply give you, express our sympathy and give our moral support.
Thank you, Dr. Freiberga.
Дякую, доктор Фрайберга.
Дякуємо, пані Фрайберга. Богдана Костюк, Радіо Свобода. Фактично кожного дня ми отримуємо інформацію з західних ЗМІ, що військові літаки і військові озброєння Росії наближаються дуже близько до кордону із Латвією, з Естонією. Чи це просто маневри, чи це щось інше? Я би інтерпретувала це як залякування, перш за все. Це демонстрація сили. Також я побоююся, що це може бути, для цього можуть бути військові.
Baltic airspace happen all around the perimeter of our international waters and the sea and also on the eastern border. And I have a feeling that somebody back in Moscow has a sort of a plan of Europe where they have noted how many seconds it takes for the NATO planes to intercept a plane coming in from Russia. And that is, again, rather alarming. Why do they need to do that? Why is it so important for, if they are friendly neighbors and peaceful, a peaceful nation, why are they testing how many seconds or minutes it takes for their planes to be intercepted if they start entering our airspace? But even more alarming is the display of force on the western borders of NATO countries, all the way down the coast of Norway and all the way down to the coast of Portugal. There have been Russian warplanes encroaching or just about threatening to encroach on territorial waters. And these are planes that can fly 1,500 kilometers without refueling. And I think that what is happening is, again, a sort of reminder that Russia has great military power and great military strength. And to me, it looks like a means of intimidation.
Hi, Your Excellency, Luke Harding from The Guardian in London. What's your prognosis for what's going to happen to the self-declared DNR and LNR republics in the east? Do you think this is now a frozen conflict? Do you think they're a fact, whether we like it or not, or do you think something may change?
I think that Ukraine would have been able to defend those two regions if its army had been in full battle readiness, and if the development of its own capabilities of defense had not been neglected in recent years. I have heard some expressions of actually suspicion of sabotage within the Ukrainian army. Crimea happened in such a way that it took absolutely everybody by surprise. And sadly, the West thought that it could be solved by diplomatic means and discouraged Ukraine from resisting militarily until it was too late. Ukraine decided to resist in these other regions. Of course, now blood is being shed, but it seems to me a logical thing to do to defend one's territory as much as one is able. My own country, when it was declared its independence in 1918, had to fight for 2 years. Bolsheviks in the east and the renegade Germans in the west. Before in 1920, it secured full control of its territory.
Ladies and gentlemen, more questions? Mrs. President, I have a question. We, of course, in Ukraine feel very grateful to Latvia for all the support.
Would you speak up, please, because somebody else is speaking in the background.
Okay. We feel very grateful for the support that Latvia is providing to Ukraine, and we feel that nobody else can relate as much to our situation as the countries of Baltics. Because you have similar experience and you understand what it's to be threatened by a bigger state. What would be your advice to Ukraine and to Ukrainian authorities in this situation? What should be done?
From the way it's perceived in the West, and not just in Latvia, but generally in the European Union, Ukraine was seen as a country that many accepted as being in the so-called Russian sphere of influence. after we recovered our independence, many thought that the Baltic countries should also be in the Russian sphere of influence, and we complained and said this is the Molotov-Ribbentrop or the Hitler-Stalin pact all over again. As president of the Club de Madrid, which represents over 100 former presidents and prime ministers from all over the world, not just Europe, but from all continents, I drafted a statement saying that the concept of spheres of influence in this day and age, to us, democratically elected former heads of state and government, was totally unacceptable. That each sovereign country, which is a member of the United Nations, has the right to decide its own fate. And nobody should accept the desire of a larger country imposing its will on the neighbors just because they happen, you know, the misfortune of living next door. So this is something that Ukraine has to fight, I think, on the information front and on a diplomatic front to reassert your rights to nationhood, to territorial integrity, to total sovereignty. It is not up to the Kremlin to decide whether you have a federation or some other system of governance. You may receive advice from them, and you may receive advice from the European Commission or from the United Nations or OSCE or whoever. But a sovereign nation should be able to decide its form of governance. You have had recently the new system after the mass protests on Maidan has been legitimized by presidential elections, by parliamentary elections, and by a formally and legally approved government. So I think you have to engage in very vigorous information campaign to remind the whole world that you are a sovereign nation which is entitled to take sovereign decisions, and it's not up to Russia to say how you should be federalized or not, or in what manner.
Thank you.
One thing the West is absolutely keen on, and the International Monetary Fund, of course, will insist on, is that in its current administrative structures, Ukraine is threatened with default and with severe breakdown of state structures. So that really essential reforms which have been postponed and which the Ukrainian public has been reluctant to push for, these will be necessary if you are to get the international help that Ukraine needs at the moment. There are a great many nations ready to help, but they do wish to see Ukrainians themselves continue in a path that leads them to increasing democracy, decreasing corruption, and eliminating waste in national administration.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just a freelancer here. My name is Gennady Barzikov. I'm a foreign Ukrainian. And I have a question for you, because you presented, to me, seems to me, one-sided view. Don't you think that there is a legitimate interest in the East, in some people in the East of Ukraine, now called terrorists by people here in Kiev or by you, but for some they are freedom fighters? I mean,
sorry?
Freedom fighters. And like, you know, probably there's a guy from England, this third law of Newton, each action equal counteraction. You have Maidan here, there was some counteraction in the east of Ukraine or in Crimea, let's say. People had genuine interest, and they presented the interest. Don't you recognize this at all? This is the question, basically.
You see, there are rather significant differences between what happened on the Maidan and what happened in the Crimea and elsewhere in eastern Ukraine. You probably had provocateurs who came here on the Maidan and tried to create disorder and make it appear as a sort of delegitimize the will of the people, which was manifested there. If in eastern regions of Ukraine people felt that they had revendications, that they had claims, well, then there are various ways of expressing that within the legal structures of a country such as Ukraine. Scotland just had a referendum. Scotland had a referendum about independence. This was a referendum that was freely organized. There was no foreign army standing behind people's backs while this referendum was taken. So that is a legitimate referendum, and they decided finally to stay together with Great Britain. There is now a controversy in Spain. Should the referendum in Catalonia be allowed to go ahead? But certainly, if the Catalonians consistently continue to say they want a referendum, I suspect the Spanish government is going to accept it. Rising up in arms out of the blue, to me, I did not see any particular reason why they should be doing that, and I think the excuse of people being on the Maidan, then they could have done it during the Orange Revolution if they were so unhappy. But what is most distressing is that we have a war that is masquerading under the name of local insurrection. When foreign troops are coming in quite visibly, there are satellites that take pictures. We know what the troop movements were. There are documented evidence of individuals who come from the Urals, who come from the Caucasus, who come from various parts, St. Petersburg or wherever. These were not local inhabitants. These were people sent in from Russia with the insignia removed, and we have now what is called a hybrid war, which is sort of like a mockery, like a carnival event, except that people are being killed and the country is being attacked.
Mrs. President, I'm hoping you can comment on, there's been something of a discussion in both Ukraine and the West about a potential conflict between both reforms on the one hand and defense on the other. I'm wondering if you could comment from your personal experience and the experience of Latvia in particular, whether it's better for Ukraine to defend itself first from Russian aggression and from the events that are happening in Donbass right now, or whether reforms should be given a higher priority, or if these two can be accomplished simultaneously and perhaps if they're intertwined.
I see that Ukraine has no choice here. It's like being asked, do we cut off your right arm or your left arm? You need both arms to live, and you have to preserve both arms. And that means the reforms have to be executed as quickly as at all possible. International aid has to be negotiated and received as quickly as possible. But the neglect of your armed forces is having tragic consequences, and Ukraine should continue to do its best efforts, at least, to defend what is still left of its territory, because the way things are shaping up, you see, Crimea was occupied and annexed, but that was not enough. The movement extended further into Ukrainian territory, and there's no guarantee that it will not continue extending to a corridor that leads all the way to Moldova. So I think, yes, you do have to defend yourselves.
Mrs. President, in terms of much-needed reforms, can Latvian experience be applicable in Ukraine? Can we use something from your experience here in the current situation?
We can certainly share our experience. Each country has, of course, a different historical, if you like, situation developing in various sectors. But we do share, after all, half a century of Soviet rule and a great many relics, certainly in people's thinking and in manners of doing things, that we, at the beginning of independence, saw were a hindrance to the development of our nation, and that we took great efforts, and there was a serious commitment on all succeeding governments to reform our country as quickly as we could and to bring it up to the standards that in the meantime, in the last 50 years, had been adopted in Europe as being those of civilized countries and democracies. Sometimes it was painful, there was a social cost, but there was a really strong determination on the part of the people that change was necessary because we wanted to rejoin the Western world. We felt we belonged there. there. And this is why we even joined the Eurozone when the Eurozone is maybe not so brilliantly growing right now, but we feel that being integrated in the transatlantic structures is what has given us our security and so on. I think the ambassador would like to enlarge on that.
Thank you. Yes, from the embassy side, we have initiated several projects where we give opportunity to representatives from different regions in Ukraine to take part in courses in Latvia, especially designed for Ukraine. I can mention already what happened. It's a course in how to fight corruption, the course in e-government, and also now very soon taking place a course of anti-monopoly in dairy sphere. And we have also made one course for representatives from local governments, share our experience in administrative reform. Today arrived a delegation from Latvian local government ministry, regional development ministry, to Chernihiv. And with Chernihiv regional council, we have a very good cooperation. And next week, a delegation from regions of Odessa, Vinnytsia, Chernihiv, and Sumy and Poltava will be going to Riga for a course. So if our experience is of interest, we are ready to continue this kind of sharing of our experience.
The government has also taken a number of wounded and brought them to Latvia who have been received medical care and rehabilitation. And there is a fund now, civil society fund, gathering voluntary donations. And with these donations, additional wounded from Ukraine are being brought to Latvian hospitals for treatment. That is purely a sort of spontaneous movement on the part of the people.
Thank you. Colleagues, any more questions? Okay, thank you, Mrs. President, Mrs. Ambassador. Thank you for coming here, and thank you for your immense support of Ukraine. We really appreciate that.
You're welcome. We certainly feel for you, and we sort of root for you and for your success.
Thank you very much.